This one's one that up until a few years ago I'd never tried before, but on my ski trip to America I came across this in a restaurant. I remember thinking to myself, oh yes, I'll try this, it's reasonably cheap. I think it was about $8-10, something around there, so purchased it, only to realise, yes, I need to also add tax. It came to something crazy like $12.50 or something for what, like 3 or 4 shrimp, battered shrimp. Anyway, this recipe calls for chickpea flour, which I do not have. So, what we can try and do is grind them up. And this is not working at all, this pestle and mortar, although it's brilliant. I'm sure is much more suited to spices. Time to get the food processor out. I'm sure this will be a lovely, quick and easy job in the food. Oh my goodness, what is that sound? Usually I don't play clips of audio from the actual time, but I think this is a special exception. Headphone users, please be warned. Not nice stuff. Anyway, we're going to pulse this until it's powdery, even after the first grind through. Whatever noise that was created there was maybe worth it. My eardrums are burst, but at least we've got some chickpea flour starting to form. I think we're going to need to do this for quite a bit longer, but we should get there eventually. And now, once that's done, we've kind of created this crunchy chickpea flour. It's not perfect, to be honest, but it will definitely do for what we're doing. And hey, it gives a bit of uniqueness to this otherwise bland and uninteresting batter that we're about to create. It's definitely not bland and uninteresting, but you know, it gives it a bit of character. And this is something that I was dreading, peeling the prawns, and my dread was definitely justified. We're keeping the tails on and removing the heads and the shells, and this is not a nice process at all. Didn't see it for this first one, but every time I was pulling the heads off, there was this red goop that just was emitted from it. Probably some bodily fluids or something, but what we're doing here is we're beheading it so that the head doesn't get in the way of eating it, and we're deveining it, which is the act of removing what's effectively its digestive tract. You can keep the legs on if you want, but there's no harm in taking them off either. I just found it was easier to peel if I took the legs off. Now that tumultuous process has been completed, we lay out some cling film. This will stop the next process from sticking the prawns together or to the chopping board. I must admit, this is the step that I didn't do too well. If you're able to do this with a meat mallet, definitely try that. Or if you actually know how to pound prawns into thinner shapes, please let me know, because I have no idea still. I end up butchering most of these, but you know, they're going to be battered, coated and fried, so who's going to know the difference, right? I ended up using a heavy bottomed glass to pound the meat. It still works, but I think the real issue that came from it was my method rather than the actual object that I was using to hammer out the meat. Now that I've royally messed that up, time to move on to the batter. Here we're using the chickpea flour, if you can call it that, and some gluten-free flour. Technically we should be using pure rice flour. Gluten-free flour that we get at least is a mixture of like potato starch flour and other types of flour, but rice flour is the main predominant part of it, so I decided to subsidise it with that. We also add in a few cumin seeds, a tiny bit of cayenne pepper, and a tiny bit of mixed powder that I had left. Finally, we add in the baking powder and we mix this up so it's of even consistency. And once that's done, we start mixing with water. We can now begin coating the prawns in this batter. It's quite a runny looking thing, but when you get into it, it's quite thick due to the more coarse chickpea flour that we've used. Oh, and this is a new pan. I got this pan for my birthday, and it's for curries mainly, but we'll give it a go with deep frying. Remember, olive oil's safer to use, but I thought actually after I put it in, it's more expensive, so I decided to switch over to the vegetable oil. We're going to heat this up and coat the prawns in the meantime. When they're all coated, we need to make sure that the oil is hot enough, and we do that by throwing a tiny bit of the batter into it, and if it starts fizzling, it's done. And now we put these prawns into the oil, and they should fry over time. So we're going to keep this topped up with oil, and you might be able to see that the batter is beginning to fall off some of these prawns. So what we do in this situation is we take out the prawns that aren't completely coated and we recoat them with batter. This way the batter is in 2 stages and is really thick on the prawn. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It just helps if any stick to the bottom. And once that second coat of batter is finished, out they come. And there we have battered prawns, much cheaper than the American alternative I had those many years ago, and very scalable. Plus, they kind of taste better considering that they're homemade.